I'm John, office worker. I had a wife. I met her at a mixer hosted by a friend. She was beautiful and cute. Love at first sight for me. And I was the one who started the conversation. That was how I met my wife. Later on, we started dating, and then she got pregnant. It was a shotgun wedding, but I was happy with our adorable daughter. My wife had strong opinions and wasn't afraid to voice them. She looked cool and strict, but she was actually kind and loved to have fun. She was a beauty, like a famous actress, and great at housework, way too good for me. Our daughter was just as cute as her mother. When I showed her picture around, people would say, "She's going to be popular when she grows up." Well, she's the opposite of her mom, shy and always playing video games. But that shyness was also endearing. I loved my daughter so much. One day, I came home, and my wife stopped talking to me completely. No matter what I said, she ignored me. No matter the topic, she ignored me. But she talked normally to our daughter. So my daughter, who was in second grade back then, was confused. She looked at us uneasily. Even an 8-year-old could sense something was off with my wife's behavior. I thought she was just in a bad mood, but the ignoring went on from that day forward. At first, she just ignored me, but then her behavior got worse. She wouldn't prepare my meals or wash my clothes. I wondered what I had done to deserve this, and if I had done something wrong. I did my share of the housework and parenting. I even did family activities, and of course, I wasn't cheating. I had no clue what was going on. Eventually, I had to start doing all the housework myself, but my wife's treatment didn't stop there. She began to badmouth me to our daughter, and she'd do it deliberately when I was in the living room or where I could hear.
Oh, if only someone wasn't earning such a low salary, we could move out of this cramped apartment. Well, that's impossible for a useless man. That's right, you can't expect anything, because it's always going to be impossible. Catherine, you shouldn't become someone who can't do anything like him, okay?
She kept making these disrespectful comments, and gradually, my daughter started treating me the same way, too. She'd ignore me or click her tongue when I spoke to her. And when she turned 9, she started verbally abusing me.
I wish you would just die already. Oh, you were here. I didn't notice because you're as insignificant as the air. You heard that, right? Just die already, old man. You're so annoying. Why are you even here?
That's how it was at home. If we saw each other, she'd insult me. She's gotten into the habit of ignoring me, even when I talk to her. Even though she ignored me, she wanted me to hear her insults. How selfish can you get? My wife and daughter seemed to be having a great time going out and traveling together. And of course, I was left out. It's a strange story. It's my money they're spending however they like. And they never tell me anything, you know. Looking back now, I can see it was odd. But at the time, I didn't notice. Because my heart was broken. Being insulted every day, feeling small and insignificant. I was getting sick without even realizing it. I had trouble sleeping at night. My appetite was poor. My hair was falling out. And above all, my stomach hurt every day. I was zoning out more during the day. I was definitely breaking down. Then one day, I found a printout of my daughter's school open day in the trash. It was already past the date. I confronted my daughter, who was lounging on the living room sofa. "Hey, Catherine." "Hey."
TCH, what do you want, loser?
"This open day. Why didn't you tell me about it?"
Huh? Why would I need to tell someone like you? I didn't want you to come.
"I wanted to go, though."
Well, I didn't want you to. That's why I didn't tell you.
"Why would you say something so cruel?"
This is so annoying. You're not even my real dad, so stop acting like it.
"What?"
Oops. I was just kidding. Just kidding.
My daughter tried to backpedal on her statement. I felt a strong sense of discomfort, but I couldn't figure out what it was. Around that time, a good friend and also my colleague invited me out for drinks. Not wanting to go home, I agreed, and we went to a bar nearby. As soon as we toasted, my colleague asked me, "So, what's going on?" "What do you mean, what's going on? Don't play dumb. It's obvious to everyone you've got something troubling you. You look like hell, and we haven't seen each other in a while. What happened during the 3 years I was away for work?" We used to work in the same department and spurred each other on. I thought I could confide in him. I told him everything about my family, things I hadn't been able to tell anyone before. I thought he would understand, as he has a son about the same age as my daughter. After I finished telling everything, he thought for a moment and then said, "Girls sometimes reject their fathers. It could be that, but still, that attitude is too much, I think. She's still just in elementary school, right? If it's like this now, it's only going to get worse. Maybe you should talk to your wife and daughter. Your wife's influence must be significant."
That might be difficult.
They are very close. Then maybe you should get a divorce and distance yourself from them. You're a mess, and you need to get away from your wife and daughter as soon as possible. Divorce, huh? Well, take your time thinking about whether to divorce or not. But in my opinion, I think you should get a divorce. And about what your daughter said, if it bothers you, why not get a DNA test?
A DNA testament between me and my daughter.
Yeah, better to clear things up than to live with uncertainty.
Makes sense. After my colleague's suggestion, I decided to get a DNA test after a night of thinking. I collected some of my daughter's hair and sent it off to the testing company along with mine. I was amazed at how easy it was nowadays. Then, 2 weeks later, I secretly checked the results, which were sent to my office in a bathroom stall. Their results showed there was a 99% chance that my daughter and I were not blood related. I found out she wasn't my child. The days that followed were truly hell. I couldn't bear the pain that I had been able to endure. I thought the terrible attitude of my wife and daughter must have been partly my fault. But my wife had been betraying me even before we got married. And probably, my daughter knew it too. She must know who her real father is. What do they think of me? Maybe it was the sudden stress, but one day I collapsed at work with severe stomach pain. I made such a scene in the office that I was taken away by ambulance. Later, I was diagnosed with severe stress. The doctor told me to take it easy. And then my colleague, who came to visit me, said with pity, "Man, just get a divorce. I can't stand to see you suffer like this. I'll help you, so please, John, get a divorce." I found myself unconsciously nodding to my colleague's words. I thought I had reached my limit. I couldn't stay with a wife who wouldn't come to see me even after hearing I had collapsed. And so, I decided to divorce my wife. After being discharged from the hospital, I followed my colleague's advice and headed to a private investigator. I thought I'd start by finding my daughter's real father, the secret lover. I also requested an investigation into my wife's infidelity. This was also the advice from my colleague. "I think the reason your wife's attitude got worse is because she has a lover. Maybe he's Catherine's father. If your daughter knows her real father, it's likely she's been meeting him. It's worth looking into. Even if it's not true, if your wife has been unfaithful, it'll work in your favor for the divorce." My colleague was very reliable, and he really helped me out when I was completely worn out. A few days after hiring the private investigator, I felt a little more at ease, thinking I'd soon be free from this hell. I didn't mind being at home as much as before, and I could handle it. Thinking it's almost over made their insults seem almost endearing. And because I felt more at ease, I started smiling more. People at work even said, "John, you seem a lot happier." Indeed, it had been years since I'd naturally smiled. I had only been able to force a smile recently. With more sleep, my physical discomfort disappeared, and I finally felt like myself again. My wife and daughter seemed to sense something was off with the happier me. And on one of such days, out of the blue, my wife suggested, "How about we have a second child?" She dropped this bombshell right before bed, and I was so shocked I froze. "A second child? You mean a baby?" Of course, what else? Our daughter is getting older, so what do you think?
She was all smiles as she spoke, but it had been 3 years since she last initiated a conversation with me. To me, that smile was nothing but eerie. I told her I didn't understand what she meant. "No thanks. I don't want another child."
Think it over. I want one. It's going to be me raising them anyway, so what's the harm? Not helping out. What kind of husband does that make you?
I couldn't care less about cooperating. She was the one who drove our marriage into the ground. I was actively involved in parenting until my daughter started ignoring me. Her dismissing that made me so angry. I made a certain suggestion. Fine, I don't mind.
Really?
Only if we can do a DNA test. Her eyes widened in shock. Seeing her like that suddenly made me feel mischievous, so I added, just to be sure, just to be sure. I recently read this awful novel about cuckoldry, where a man ends up raising another man's child. It made me feel terrible. So, just to be safe, I thought we should test. The word cuckoldry made her flinch. Convinced she was guilty, I decided to drive the point home. Well, I don't think you would do such a thing, Jessica. As I said this with a smile, she looked startled and replied,
Of course not.
She left, stammering. Finding her reaction amusing, a few days later, I casually mentioned to my lounging wife, just so you know, I've decided to do a DNA test with Catherine. I've already sent the samples. Sorry for letting you know now, but that's okay, right? Her eyes went wide with shock. Seemingly out of excuses, she could only say, I see. Feeling playful, I pressed on. Just so you know, if Catherine isn't my child, I'm filing for divorce.
What?
That's obvious, right? Because that would mean I've been cuckolded and made to raise a child that isn't mine. I can't stay with someone who's treated me so horribly. Besides, we were together long before Catherine was born. So, if she's not mine, it means you cheated. Well, I don't think it's true. But if it is, I'll be asking for compensation, just so you know. She turned pale and froze. Satisfied, I left the living room. And a few days later, I went to the detective agency to hear the investigation results. As expected, the results were just as I had anticipated. My wife had the lover, and they had met several times with my daughter. According to the detective agency, the man and my daughter seemed close, almost like a real father and daughter at first glance. Well, they are blood related, so they are the real family. Armed with these results, I went to a divorce lawyer known for his expertise. And then a week later, when both my wife and daughter were home in the evening, I returned home with the lawyer. The two were shocked to see an unfamiliar man in the living room, but their demeanor changed when he handed them his business card. My wife was visibly shaken. Her legs seemed to give out. My daughter, sensing something bad from my wife's reaction, hid behind her. I showed my wife a document. This is the DNA test result between me and Catherine. I was shocked by the results. To find out Catherine isn't really my child. I had requested a DNA test from a different company than the one initially used for the investigation. I never imagined it would turn out like this. I did it on a whim. Really?
John, calm down. It's not like that.
What do you mean not like that? I trusted you. Then who is her real father?
I have no idea.
My wife brazenly lied, and my anger surged. I called in someone who had been waiting at the entrance. There stood Stephen with a swollen cheek, alongside his furious wife.
Why are you here? I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. It's obvious why. Because you two were having an affair. Face the consequences, you wench.
Please, let's keep things civil. The lawyer struggled to calm down Stephen's wife, who looked ready to strike at any moment. My wife and daughter screamed and ran away. Stephen just stood there, creating a surreal scene. I guess that his wife's reaction was understandable. Before coming here, she had just stormed into his house. After a confrontation there, everyone was still on edge. The reason for Stephen's swollen cheek was a punch from his wife. Anyway, let's proceed with the discussion. The affair between Jessica and Stephen has been confirmed by the detective agency's investigation. Their long-term relationship was evident from their SNS exchanges and photos.
When did this happen? As if you didn't know.
Right, until recently, that is. We will also be conducting a DNA test on Stephen and Catherine.
What? Why?
This is at John's request. If it turns out Catherine is Stephen's child, it will affect the compensation amount. You'll cooperate, won't you?
Well, you're not going to refuse, right? Yes.
Overwhelmed by the situation, wife's presence, my wife, daughter, Stephen, all agreed. A few days later, under the lawyer's supervision, DNA samples were collected. Later on, the results came in. As expected, it turned out that Catherine was indeed Stephen's child. I was prepared for it, but it was still a shock. However, it allowed me to make a clean break. I decided to divorce my wife and demanded a substantial amount of alimony from her and Stephen. The divorce was settled without property division. My wife got custody of Catherine, but I wouldn't have to pay child support. Thanks to the cuckoldry, I was able to divorce on terms quite favorable to me. It was awful when we filled out the divorce papers with the lawyer present. My wife and Catherine came groveling to me.
Hey John, I apologize for everything. Let's start over, shall we? I'm a stay-at-home mom, you know. We can't live without you, John. So please, let's try again.
It's out of the question. Think about what you two have done. Have you forgotten how terribly you treated me?
No, it's different. We just happened to run into each other again and got carried away. Really, it was over with him when I got pregnant with Catherine. After all, he was married. We just happened to meet again 3 years ago. I apologize for treating you badly, John, when my feelings got carried away. John, please, let's start over. Dad, please, if you and Mom get divorced, I'll have to go to a different elementary school without my friends. I really don't want that. So please, make up with Mom.
I sighed at their self-serving apologies. I told them, you two are the ones who betrayed me, and went to submit the completed divorce papers. That was the last time I saw my wife and daughter. In the end, Catherine went to an elementary school near Jessica's parents' home, and they seemed to be living in a shabby apartment. Jessica's parents were furious about Jessica's affair and refused to let them live with them. Moreover, it seems Jessica was also sued for alimony by Stephen's wife. She's struggling to make ends meet, working part-time and paying alimony. Stephen and his wife got divorced. It seems she received a significant amount of alimony. However, Stephen and my wife didn't remarry. They're both single now. They might as well have gotten married. As for me, I'm enjoying a carefree bachelor life.